podcast is part of the Batman Universe podcast network, hosted by the BatmanUniverse.net. Here, we love talking about everything Batman. The BatmanUniverse.net has news, original content, and reviews about Batman comics, movies, TV shows, video games, and more. Check out the BatmanUniverse.net and join our Discord server to start chatting with fellow fans. We can't wait to talk to you guys. Also, visit our Patreon page and join our other awesome supporters. But enough of this nonsense. On with the show.
Hey, Bat fans. I'm your host, Scott, and in this week's episode of the Batman Universe podcast, I'm joined by a very special guest. Previously, she was a storyboard artist for a beloved cartoon series and movies like The Simpsons, American Dad, Harley Quinn, Mortal Kombat Legends, Cage Match, and more. Most recently, she has directed episodes of the latest season of Batwheels on Max and Cartoon Network. I'm thrilled to welcome Lila Martinez, an animation industry professional whose career boasts work for Disney, 20th Century Studios, Netflix, and Warner Brothers. Hi, Lila. Thanks for joining me. How are you?
Very good. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. And you've worked at quite a few studios and have had quite the career so far. So I'm happy to touch base and, talk about a lot of your work as well as, the Batman stuff, since we are a Batman focused podcast. Before we jump into that stuff, though, I know you've talked about your story on other podcasts, but for our audience, Can you tell us what drew you to animation?
Well, I could say Batman, but it's not the case in animation. Actually, what drew me to animation was really Chuck Jones cartoons and like the classic Saturday morning cartoons. I was watching a TV special and it just blew my mind seeing all the behind the scenes and all the work that a cartoon requires, all the art and story. And I was very young when it really hit me, and I couldn't find anything else to do with my life, really. And I love stories. I love storytelling and creating characters and understanding them. And that's how I started.
Okay. Do you feel, since you went the animation route, do you feel maybe there's like something in the medium of animation that other mediums don't have, or is it just because that's the one that hits you?
For me, animation, any character, like let's say Batman, right? You are seeing Batman. You are seeing the character just like you do in the comics. You're not seeing an actor portraying Batman. So for me, animation, what it does is you really, even though that sometimes you hire name actors, you still see the characters as they are. So that's one of the things that live action cannot provide, because you will always remember the actor in other movies, in other TV shows, and there are no limits. I mean, right now, live action uses a lot of animation, a lot of CG and green screens, and now sometimes you have less actors than what is animation. Like, I don't know, so many productions that they're so heavily inside a fake CG special effects and flying and the background and everything. So now it's kind of the worlds can have merged together, but still animation is you can do anything as long as you have the talent, especially in 2D animation, in drawn animation. As long as you can draw what you need, you can do it. I mean, there are things harder than others, but is the power and the limitless of animation.
True. Yeah. And then, no, that was a really good answer. And actually, the fact that you brought up 2D and then, CG animation projects, I know in your career, you've worked on both, it looks like. And, as an artist, is making the switch between the two challenging? Are there limitations or differences between the two that animators need to be on the lookout for and keen of as they're starting these projects?
I think it's good to know both. Originally, I wanted to be a traditional hand-drawn animator, but the LA studios shut down before I even had the chance to study the art. But at least I was able to study it and draw on paper and flip the pages and see the characters coming into life just being drawings. And after I studied that, 5 years later, I went back to school to study CG, and I realized the difference of the medias. For example, into the you can draw anything. The props are really not an issue. Of course, you need designs, but it's more like it's more the skills of the artist versus the paper. And in CG, you need much more money. You need a lot of people. You need engineers. You need people that understand coding. Hair is a different. What is hair and clothing? That's a completely different specialty of people than the character animators, and it's much more complicated, I will have to say. And you have to be able to use both sides of your brain, like going from the creative side to the engineer side, which I can go back and forth. But it is tiring, I have to say. I like staying in the creative side more often.
Yeah.
But CGE also has a lot of possibilities, and now thanks to certain movies, they are allowing to experiment more in the visuals. Now they don't look all the same as they used to, so I'm glad they are the studios now are open to more, and even combining both worlds, CG and to the effects, for example.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. Well, and I think that's kind of the benefit of animation, though, I would say, is like having that different look and everything. I know as, just a person who likes watching animated projects, just seeing different styles displayed and kind of showcased in different colors, it's kind of a kick for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with like a project, a Harley Quinn versus, Batwheels, it seems like as a viewer, it looks like Batwheels has a lot more, kind of a CG style to it. So would that be like a much more complicated process?
Both shows were complex in different ways. The thing with Harley Quinn is there were a lot of crowd scenes and a lot of chases and fights, and it's still a TV show in a TV schedule. So you have to deal with that. You have to be very, very fast, and you have to be able to draw human characters proportion and drawn model. And it's a tough show to crack, and also dealing with live action writers sometimes. You get a lot of notes. That's very normal in prime time. The other shows that I worked on, like Simpsons and American Dad, were no different. As animators, especially to the traditional train, you have to be able to see things before you start doing them.
Mhm.
And live action people, they're not used to that. They're just, even actors or directors, it's like, okay, let's just make another take, and now why don't you try this other stuff? So that's the way they work. So it's you have to find a balance, and sometimes, I mean, there are retakes that I didn't know they existed until I worked in primetime. And with Batwheels, we had the advantage of the camera. Like the camera, you can do whatever you need, and but it's another challenge in the sense that you have to light every shot, and you have to, sometimes we will get very green talent in the camera, so the cameras wouldn't move exactly as one of the showrunners wanted, and you have to make it more dynamic and follow the cars, and but still make it kid friendly. And we will get notes from SMP like, yeah, I know it's a superhero, but like, for example, Batman couldn't jump from a from a building because that's dangerous. So if we did that, the camera need to point from the ground up. You should see Batman falling towards camera instead of him jumping to the ground. So some tricks here and there. And it's a completely different storytelling. One is for it's very adult humor,
Yeah.
very adult, and the other is a kids show. So and the way that you tell stories is also different. The kids, because they're still developing their brains, you have to explain things in a different way, show more stuff. And in prime time is mostly about the dialogue, and as long as the character says something, that is enough. And with kids you have to show it.
That makes sense. I mean, that's a lot to think about too, in terms of how you approach it. And then even what you were saying with like Batman leaping off a building, just having the camera angle just right so it doesn't, approach something dangerous. I don't
Yeah.
think, yeah, that's interesting to think about, but it's a lot of depth that goes into it. Just, what we're talking about is just, probably a drop in the bucket of, your day to day. But, it's really interesting to think about. Something I wanted to pick at for Harley Quinn, when I was looking at your IMDb and everything, I noticed you were a storyboard artist on what I would consider to be one of, if not the best episodes of the series, the 83rd annual Villy Awards.
Oh, really?
And
You like it
yeah,
that much?
yeah, that was a great one. But the thing I wanted to ask is, you're working on, not only is it like an adult cartoon, but it's a comedy show too. So I imagine there's a
Hmm.
delicate balance with timing, especially, even though it is more dialogue focused because it's, you're trying to tie the animation to like comedic timing, and I
Well,
wonder
I
if that was
I
difficult
learned
and what the process, was like for a show like Harley Quinn.
I learned a lot on The Simpsons on comedy storytelling and comedy timing. The people there, I mean, I really learned how to reveal a gag. So that just came easier, and I like the fact that Harley Quinn is not as raunchy as other adult comedies out there. Again, what's challenging is dealing with so many characters. I think that was the biggest challenge, and that episode has a lot of crowds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even have celebrity cameos in there, like Billy Bob Thornton and everything.
Yes. Yeah. That one was challenging nailing him because he's not very. When you deal with animation, normally you will get voice actors that the only tool they have is their voice. But
Mhm.
with live action actors, sometimes the recording comes a little flat, and you still need to make it funny. So that was a lot of back and forth with Billy Bob Thornton, I have to say.
Oh, really? Oh, so do you have
Yeah.
to like, so how does that like work then? Do you kind of just pitch some of the ways it's going to look or appear and kind of bounce it back and forth? Or,
That's another difference that I have to mention about the difference between Batwheels and Harley Quinn. Batwheels, there was more freedom there. They approach it more like feature, and in feature, as a story artist, you get the script, but you're allowed to plus it. You're allowed to change the story a little bit, or discuss with the showrunners. I think this other idea will work better. Why don't we try this? So you have much more freedom to make the story better in prime time in every show, because we're working with WGA writers. The guild protects them, so we as animators from a different guild, we're not allowed to change anything from the
hmm,
script. So everything that I have to follow the script as it is. So it wasn't really up to me to make any changes. I will just follow direction. I will follow the script. I will present, and then the showrunners and writers will say, okay, this is not working. Let's try this other thing. But that will be up to them, not up to the artist. So it's a different way of working.
and, something I was going to ask about is, I was watching, some of your samples you had of the storyboard process, and they're really in depth. There's a lot of movement and everything there. And I'm not someone who watches like storyboards all the time, but the ones I've seen are more static. And so that was kind of fascinating to me. Is that just part of the process that's evolved where like you have that in there to better showcase, to all the other teams involved, what this ideally is going to look like? Or because it almost seems like there's almost full movement of animation there.
Yeah, the storyboards have kind of evolved in the last, especially the last 10 years, since they became digital. The tools, they do speed the process, but then the studios, they also request more stuff from you.
Mm,
And it's not only that, it's not that they want to be mean and they want to exploit you. Well, maybe some of them do, right? But there is a reason behind it. The animation is not done in LA anymore. There's very few animators currently working in LA. Most of the shows, they are shipped overseas, especially Korea. We send a lot to South Korea, and because of the lack of communication, you have to be very specific. So the more specific you are in the boards, the better results you get back from overseas. In When I was working on another primetime show, I worked a lot on the retakes department,
mhm.
and I will see firsthand the mistakes that come back. So the the clearer you can be, the better results you are going to get. But I mean, you have to adapt to the time and budget that you have.
Right.
We're not supposed to be animators or keyframe everything, but sometimes, especially, and if you have choreographies, the better you do it, the better it will come back. Sometimes, if it's too rough, they won't be able to understand what's going on, and it will take time to get the answer from LA to Korea or to, I don't know, to Canada or whatever. So now storyboards, they have more posing, unless they are for features and unless
Mhm.
they are for live action in particular. They're more focused on the composition and the camera and how it's going to cut, because you leave the acting to the actors, so you don't need to worry about that at all. Here we have to give something to the animators, and it depends on the studio. There are studios that they will have more a talent that is more mature, and they can bring something themselves. And there are others that they hire kids straight out of school, so they need more hand holding. So it's a balance. It depends on the people that you're working with. So you have to find a good way of work.
Okay. Cool. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And, obviously it seems like with the evolution of everything too, that, you know, it's interesting though to see how that or talk about how that kind of evolves and changes over time. I wanted to talk about Batwheels a little bit, but before I do, in our email exchanges we've had prior, before even setting up this meeting, you mentioned you've been a lifelong Batman fan, and I wanted to ask, how did you discover the character and, how the character maybe has influenced you or
I love Batman. Like it's my number one favorite character. I like Batman since I was a little girl watching Adam West. Really, and as a girl, I really liked the episodes with Batgirl. So I just thought she was cute and she was sexy and she was kick ass, and I really liked the three of them together. And I'm going to date myself, but when Tim Burton's Batman came into the theater, I was too young. They didn't allow me into the theater. In Mexico, they don't allow you, even if you go with your parents. It's a different way of doing things, and rating the movies. And I didn't understand, like, it's Batman, I want to watch the Batman
yeah.
movie. Like, what do you mean it's not for kids? Like, what do you mean I cannot watch Batman? So I couldn't watch Batman, and I couldn't watch Batman Returns on the movie theater. I was too young for that. And I don't know, maybe that stayed with me, the frustration that I couldn't see the films. But then also Batman the Animated Series came out, and it's my favorite show of all time. It's Paul Dini's writing is just amazing, and I love the look of it. I love Bruce Timm designs, and I watched that show, all of it. I think it's a before and after the Batman the Animated Series. So I think that was pretty much my introduction to Batman. I mean, then I watched, Batman Forever, which is fine. It's not the best film, but it was the first one that I saw in the theater, and later, you know, Dark Knight is such a wonderful piece of art, and the Batman, Matt Reeves, is also is I is like they really capture the whole thing, the characters, and yeah, and the comics I started reading in high school. Really, I love Alan Moore. I love The Killing Joke. So, but it's like Batman has always been around.
Yeah. Well, I think he's like what, 85 now? I think if we're going back to like the first issue or something. But I
Yeah.
also was around when 89 came out, and I was also too young and could not see it in theater. So
Oh, you too. Uh-huh.
yeah, yeah. So don't feel bad about dating yourself there. So, and that thing
Yeah,
is,
because it was everywhere.
yeah,
It was like a Batman mania everywhere,
yeah,
and it was like we were out of the party. We
yeah.
were not invited. Yeah.
No. In a week, yeah, actually no, less than a week. It's the 35th anniversary of that film. So kind of weird to think about how long ago that was. But yeah,
Yeah.
with the animated series, the art style on that is so unique and kind of in a league of its own. But I feel like a lot of 90s animation, I feel like there was some kind of zeitgeist there. We got like a lot of, different styles and creative people trying new things and getting inventive with it, and shows that were made for like kids and adults to watch together.
Hmm. Yeah.
But with Batwheels, actually, before I jump into that, you mentioned Batman Forever, which I find kind of interesting in the sense that Batman in Batwheels is voiced by Ethan Hawke, who was in the running to play Batman in Batman Forever and turned it down.
Well,
So I
it
thought,
took a couple of years for him,
yeah.
I guess.
But it's probably a good reason for that. But with Batwheels, you're directing episodes here. And so I wanted to ask, what does that look like day to day? What goes into the making of an episode?
Well, as every story, it starts with a script. The creator of Bad Wheels is Michael Stern. He's a very good writer, and he makes sure that the stories are good. He doesn't like talking the kids down, so they do have the requirements of preschool, like teaching a lesson and being entertaining. But they are fun to watch for everybody. It's not a chore. So I mean, we start with a script. After the writers, they go back and forth and see also what characters we are allowed to use, because everything in the Batman universe is allowed, but sometimes some characters outside the Batman universe were not allowed to use, even though that they belong to the same company. There are
I've heard
some
that. Yeah.
Yeah, there were
There's
some rules there that I didn't understand until I was working in this show. For example, we had a Green Arrow because we couldn't get another character, so we just replaced him with Green Arrow, for example. But I mean, it worked at the end. So you have the story, then you go to design. You have to decide how you're going to present this in a more of a fun way than a dangerous way. Like, what are the weapons that the Joker or the Penguin are going to use against Batman? They can't be that dangerous, or they can't be for killing. Then after that is launching the story artists, explaining them, showing them the design, showing them the sometimes most of the time we will have the set designed, and where the characters are going to move, or how are we going to reuse a previous set, and how we're going to just give it some touch up so it could look like a different location altogether, so you don't waste that much money. And so it's explaining them. In my case, I will make thumbnails. I will try to make like a very rough first pass and pitched to them, to the showrunners and the board artists, what the episode is about and what is the main story of it. I was going to mention one, but it's not out yet. The one that just came out is called Multi-Mo, and it was telling them, okay, the character is going to multiply itself, and every copy is going to be worse and worse, and the machine doesn't work well, and this is how the chaos has to be, and it has to be funny, and they get dumb and dumber and dumber the more copies we get. So it was, and it was also planning, okay, the character, the robot has to leave the Batcave. He has never left the Batcave, so how is he going to do it? Because we only see cars leaving. So how is this tiny thing going to leave? So we figured out type of door he was going to use, and he was going to fly. But in the beginning, actually, we make him jump from the cliff, and there's water underneath, and he will have a floaty. But then they said, no, the kids are going to jump from a cliff, so we couldn't make him jump from a cliff. So he flies now, like R2-D2 in the latest versions. But yeah, it's just trying to figure out how to tell the story. The board artist will make the storyboard, then it goes to editorial. We make a video with the voices and audio. You add sound to it, and then you present it to the execs. And then the executives, they will have their take on it, what they like, what they don't like, what works, what doesn't work. We go back to the boards with another team, which are the storyboard revisionists. I have to do most of the storyboard changes, and they will just do the last touches. After that, there's a second animatic, and we presented their minor tweaks because we don't have that much time. And then that is sent to overseas to get animated. That is on the story department. At the same time, on different departments, the design department are working all the props, all the new props that are needed, what needs to be designed and what is being reused. You need very good production people to keep track of everything. And we also have limitations, like how many shots can we use, how many like very fancy camera moves can we use. And you have to, sometimes if you get too many shots, you have to combine shots together in a way so the price of the episode doesn't go through the roof. And most of the characters will be rigged, but if it's a new character, you have to at the same time they will need to be designing and rigging the characters. So when the storyboard arrives, they have everything. The animators have everything to start working on it. And after that, you will have animation and lighting and rendering and compositing and layout. So it's many
Yeah,
pieces.
How long does it take to do like one episode, would you say?
In every show that I've been, it's about a year. If they are in a huge hurry, maybe 8 months.
Wow.
That's the fastest I've been. And that was a 2D show, not a CG. I don't think you cannot make a CG in less than a year. It's normally a year, the time that for everything to be complete.
Wow. I mean, that's intense. And then as a director, then you're kind of, not only are you pitching and managing and carrying that story over the finish line, but you have to also keep in mind of like budget and assets and everything and keep, right? If I'm reading that right, what you were talking about?
Yeah, you have to keep, you work with production people, you work with many different departments. It's not just the story department. And also you have to work several episodes at a time. So I was working 6 episodes at a time. So one episode will be I will prepare the files to launch the artist. Some of them will be in the design, some of them will be in story, some of them will be in revision, some of them will be in post-production and stuff. So, and you have to be very organized and have the answer to everybody, because they will knock on the doors like, hey, I need notes from this. So you need to know exactly at what point of what the story is about and at what is needed there. Everything, designs or story or notes or what executive said what or what showrunner said what or what is S&P note they gave us. Yeah, and sometimes the notes are they could change a lot. Like I had one scene of Robin skating through the city, but they don't want him on the street. So we completely changed it. It's more like now he skates kind of in a plaza. So I was able to use the storyboard artist poses, but I changed all the background. And because it's a CG show, I was able to just do a camera move with the CG set and mix everything together. And I like it better. It
Mhm.
was a good change, but yeah, you don't know what it's going to be. Like you
Yeah.
can have a plan, and sometimes the stories they work very well in script, but then when you go into storyboards, they don't work as well. So it's hard to know what will work and what doesn't. Every time you try your best, but you never know. You never know what challenges are going to appear every time.
That makes sense. Do you have any like personal favorite episodes that have come out that, those are like, this is the one, this is the one I really feel like as a story and, what we're trying to do for our audience, like this does it.
Well, Multimo just came out, and I love that episode since the script. I had a great board artist, Sarah Wiesel. She's great in comedy, and it was just the perfect episode for her, and she really nailed it. And it just that one, I I could say it was quite easy. Maybe I mean now, of course, I forget all the all-nighters and weekends working right now, but I really like that one. And I think I like when I see the showrunners and the executives, when you see them smiling, there's
Mhm.
like, yeah, I nailed it. It's like, yeah, I did a good job. Or when they hear them
Yeah,
laugh. Hmm.
it's awesome. So, and speaking on animation, you've kind of, in your career, you've worked across the spectrum of age levels, and ranges, from children to adults. Do you have a preference for which age you love working on animation projects for?
No, actually, I do like them all. They have different challenges. I don't have a preference in the age group. It's just you have to adapt your brain to the brains of your audience. Sometimes it's hard from jumping from a very adult to a very preschool or vice versa. For Harley Quinn, for example, when I made the test, I there was a character saying, "Oh, your hyena poop in the couch." So I made the character showing the pillow, and the directors were like, "Well, you really don't need to show it." I was like, "Oh yeah, because I was in preschool, so everything I needed to
Yeah.
show, so I made it show." I was like, "Oh yeah, I forgot this is just dialogue will do." But I mean, that was just a test for me to get the job. It was not a real episode. It takes about a week to adapt. I cannot say it's just immediate. It
Hmm.
takes 1 week, 2 weeks most to really understand the show and adapt yourself to into that storytelling. But I like challenges.
Hmm.
I'm such a nerd. Like I do like math problems and I like being able to solve them. So animation is kind of that. You have to figure it out. And working in the same, there's people that they are either fortunate or by choice that they've been in the same show for many years and they retire and everything. That's not for me. I feel that you don't grow. I like growing as an artist. I like learning. I try to learn. Right now, I'm taking another class with another subword for storyboarding in CG. So I always like learning more and more and becoming better at what I do. So that's why I like working in different projects.
That makes sense.
Working in the same project, which I've done for years too, it's easy because you know what you're doing. You know the characters, you know the drill. Like you know what you're going every day to the office. Going from one show to another is more challenging. But I do like it. I really like it. What I cannot do is horror. I don't think
No.
horror is for me. No.
Oh, I'm a horror guy, so that's
Oh, are you? Yeah, a lot of people is. For me, if it's a good story, I will watch it, but I don't want to do it myself.
Yeah.
Like you have to really immerse yourself in that world, and no, no thanks.
So, but like that makes sense though. Like looking at it as kind of like, it's an art, but also like the job of it too, where you are constantly wanting to grow and learn things and just kind of challenge yourself. And, and so that approach makes a lot of sense to me. Just, it's just bigger and better things and trying to, build up your repertoire, is that, for the sake of the story, I guess in your case, trying to tell like the best story you can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, then the more tools, it's just like language, right? The more words you know, the more articulate you can be.
So do you have like, is there, as you, expand your career and continue on, are there dream projects or dream properties you'd like to animate for? Are there certain characters maybe you'd like to take on just to test out, maybe not live with forever, but
I mean, this is a Batman podcast, and there is a comic that I will love it to be either a feature. I love Batgirl Year One.
Oh yeah,
I think,
that's a favorite.
I think that would be like a dream project to work on.
Well, and I feel like Batgirl doesn't get as much love as she could be. And there are multiple Batgirls now too that, I know other people on the Batman universe on the site, on other casts and whatnot, are fans of certain Batgirls over others. And, there's so many out there and there's a lot to explore. And I feel like that could be, a character that holds her own in her own TV show or cartoon or whatever form that takes.
Yeah, it's just you just need the support of somebody that can see it. I think there's an audience for it. I think the story is good. I think you can do a lot of either just with Barbara Gordon or with the rest of the bad girls out there. Yeah, I think that's something that hasn't been used as it should be. And I think there's an audience hungry for it. And I will love to be part of that if that happens.
Well, if the internet's reaction to the canceling of the Batgirl movie is any indication, I feel like there are those people there.
Yeah.
So, and how has reception been to Batwheels? Like, do you pay attention to those things? Like how your audience?
It was supposed to be a Max original and a Max exclusive, but now things have changed and it reached Netflix and it was on the top 10 for a while. So I believe it reached top 3. I think it got the third spot, and it didn't make to number 1. I mean, Coco Melon is hard to beat, but but yeah, it was in top 10 for at least 2 weeks, I think. So that was because we didn't know. In Max you cannot really measure, but in Netflix you can see it. If you hit the top 10, it means that there is an audience and that you kind of made it and that they are going to pay attention. So there's still more toys coming. So there is an audience for that. I have my own and I saw kids buying them. So there is a good reception. It's just the streamer it was a streaming wars and maybe the release dates are kind of all over the place, I have to say. But again, those are things that are out of our control. A lot of episodes are waiting just to be released. But yeah, Netflix was a good way to measure how things are going.
Yeah, well, and that's good to hear. And, as a Batman fan, it makes me happy to hear that there's probably a whole bunch of new Batman fans coming up right now, starting with something like Batwheels.
Yeah, for me, Batwheels, and that was the intention of the creator, was kind of what I got from Adam West, like a Batman for the young audience, that they also deserve a Batman show themselves. Because I love the dark Batman, and I
can't give him a Matt
love
Reeves
the dark
one though.
stories. I love the very dark stories and the drama, but as little kids, they also deserve the superhero type.
Yeah. My last question for the night Who's your
Yeah,
favorite Batman villain? Because we haven't talked about that really yet.
Joker.
Okay,
Joker. Hands
classic.
down. Like you cannot be. He's the best villain.
If you had to
Uh,
fill out a Mount Rushmore, who would you be your other three?
oh, my other three villains?
Yeah.
It will be the Penguin, Catwoman. Those are my top three. I can leave the other spot pretty much open. Maybe the Riddler. Yeah.
I have to say, the mention of the Penguin, I noticed Jess Harnell voices him in Batwheels, which I think is great because he's kind of like a voice acting legend.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Lila, thanks for joining me on the Batman Universe podcast. It was a real pleasure to have you, and I'm happy we got to chat.
Oh, thank you. It's been great. Thank you for the time.
For fans who want to see more of Lila's work, you can visit www.lilastory.com. I'll have a link below. You can also follow her on Instagram at Lila Story, all one word. I'll also have a link below to that too. For more Batman Universe content, you can visit us at thebatmanuniverse.net for comic reviews, movie news, and podcasts, and everything else under the sun Batman related. You want to chat with us, you can hop on our Discord, or you can write to us at tbu@thebatmanuniverse.net. If you like these episodes, please subscribe, rate, and share. For myself and Lila, thanks for listening.